A millionaire had just stepped through the narrow doorway and froze in shock at what he saw. 7-year-old Amara Johnson, a small black girl with dark curls tied into uneven buns, clutching her twisted leg as tears streamed down her cheeks like rivers, sobbing in agony. "My leg hurts so much, Daddy. When will the doctor fix it?" While her stepfather, Victor Harris, lounged proudly in the center of the room, spinning the keys of a brand-new luxury car he had bought with her stolen surgery money. In that instant, the man's face darkened, his jaw tightened, and he shouted a single sentence that left everyone stunned and speechless. And what happened next, no one could have expected. The sound of Amara's cries hung heavy in the suffocating air of the apartment. The walls were stained with damp patches, the carpet long since stripped to bare boards, and yet outside the window gleamed a spotless black sedan, polished to a shine as if mocking the misery inside. Amara's tiny body trembled on the thin mattress laid out on the floor, her leg curled toward her chest. Every breath was ragged. Every word was a plea for mercy. Victor sneered, leaning back in his chair as if the sobbing child before him was no more than background noise. "Keep it down, girl. You'll be fine. Nothing wrong with you that a little silence can't fix." His words dripped with venom, dismissive and cold, but Amara shook her head desperately. "No, please. The pain, it's worse every day. The doctor said the surgery could help. Please, Daddy, you promised." The word promised struck a nerve. Victor's face twisted with fury, and in a sudden burst of rage he snatched up the car keys and hurled them against the wall. The metallic crash made Amara flinch, covering her head with both small hands. "Promised?" Victor spat. "That money was mine the moment it touched my hands. You think a charity knows what's best for me? For this family? I put it to better use." Amara's wide, tear-streaked eyes turned toward the window. The car sat in plain view, shining with cruel irony. Her chest heaved, the sobs choking her voice. But I can't walk without it. Please, it hurts so much." Victor's footsteps thundered as he crossed the room, looming over her. His shadow covered her like a storm cloud. "One more word, Amara, and you'll regret it," he hissed. His hand raised halfway as though ready to strike, then lowered again when he noticed the open door and the figure standing there. The millionaire donor had not spoken yet. His eyes scanned the room, the broken furniture, the filthy carpet, the suffering child. Then his gaze fell on Victor, smug and careless, standing between the stolen car and the broken little girl. The silence stretched taut, each second more unbearable than the last. Victor's attempt at charm was feeble, his grin forced. "Oh, sir, you didn't tell us you were coming. If I'd known..." The donor's voice cut through the room, sharp as a blade. "Where is the money I gave for her surgery?" Amara froze. She had never heard an adult speak to Victor like that. For a fleeting moment, hope flickered in her chest. Victor laughed bitterly, shrugging as if the question were absurd. "What money? Things cost more than you think. Rent, bills, food, you know how it is." The donor's eyes narrowed. He glanced outside at the shining car, then back at the child who whimpered quietly on the floor. The truth was as clear as day. Amara whimpered again, clutching her leg. "Please. It hurts so much." The donor stepped further inside, his shoes clicking against the cracked floorboards. His presence filled the room with an authority Victor couldn't dismiss. He bent slightly, lowering his voice so Amara could hear him clearly. "Don't be afraid, little one. You won't be left like this anymore." Victor bristled, anger flashing in his eyes. "Hey, don't talk to her like you're her father. She's my responsibility, not yours." "Responsibility?" the donor snapped, his words shaking the walls. "A real father doesn't steal the future from a child. A real man doesn't trade her health for leather seats and polished wheels." Victor's face flushed red, his fists clenching at his sides. For the first time, his confidence faltered. He opened his mouth to retort, but no words came. The donor's gaze was relentless, piercing straight through him. Amara's tears slowed, her breath still uneven but steadier. For the first time in her short life, someone powerful stood between her and the man who called himself her guardian. And in that moment, the course of her fate shifted. The room vibrated with silence after the donor's words, every corner of the apartment echoing with their weight. Amara sat frozen on the floor, her wide brown eyes fixed on the tall stranger who had just spoken up for her. For the first time, someone stood against Victor. For the first time, she dared to hope. Victor's face twitched. He wasn't used to being challenged, certainly not in his own home. His voice rose, defensive and laced with false bravado. "Listen here, sir, you can't just barge into my house and start telling me how to run things. You gave the money, yes, but once it touched my hands, it was mine to handle." The donor's expression hardened, his eyes like steel. "That money was never yours. It was entrusted to you for one purpose only, to heal this child. Instead, you chose to waste it on vanity and greed." He pointed sharply at the gleaming car outside. "That machine out there is nothing but proof of your crime." Amara flinched at the word crime. She had never thought of her stepfather's actions that way, but hearing it spoken aloud made something click in her mind. Yes, this wasn't just unfair. It was wrong. Deeply wrong. Victor's laugh was forced, hollow. He stepped closer to the donor, trying to puff himself up. "You think you're some kind of savior walking in here in your fancy suit? You don't know what it's like, struggling day to day. I deserve that car. I've earned a little comfort." The donor didn't flinch. Instead, he lowered himself to Amara's level, kneeling on one knee so his eyes met hers. His voice softened, filled with warmth and reassurance. "Amara, right?" She blinked, startled to hear her name spoken so gently. Yes. You deserve better than this. You deserve to walk, to run, to play like every other child. And I promise you, that will happen. Do you believe me?" Her lips quivered. She wanted to believe him, desperately. "But the money, it's gone." The donor smiled faintly, a smile that carried more strength than any words. "Money can be replaced. But you, your future, cannot. Don't worry, little one. We will fix this." Victor exploded, his voice booming with rage. "She's not your daughter. Don't you dare fill her head with lies. You don't get to decide what happens in this house." His hand shot out, gripping Amara's thin arm roughly, as if to drag her away, to prove his authority in front of the intruder. Amara cried out in pain. That was the final straw. The donor's hand shot forward, gripping Victor's wrist with a force that made him yelp and release the girl instantly. "Enough!" the donor thundered, his voice shaking the walls. "If you so much as touch her again, you will answer not only to me but to the law." Victor staggered back, his face pale now. The grip of authority and power in that single moment crushed his arrogance. For years he had intimidated neighbors, silenced teachers, lied to social workers. But this was different. This man was not afraid of him. Amara clung to the donor's sleeve, hiding her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. Her small voice whispered, "Please don't leave me. Please." The donor's hand rested gently on her back. "I won't," he promised. The weight of those words settled into her heart, fragile yet fierce. For the first time since her mother had died, Amara felt the warmth of safety. Victor, meanwhile, sputtered angrily, desperate to regain control. "You think you can just take her away? Over my dead body. She's mine to raise, and no outsider has the right to interfere." The donor straightened, towering over him now. His voice was low, steady, and far more dangerous than shouting. "You forfeited that right the moment you stole from her. From now on, everything changes." Victor's bravado cracked, but his greed clung stubbornly. His eyes darted to the car outside, then to the donor's expensive watch. A calculating glimmer sparked. Perhaps he could still twist this into something for himself. But that spark faded when the donor pulled a phone from his pocket and began dialing. Who are you calling?" Victor stammered, suddenly nervous. "The authorities," the donor said simply. Amara gasped. She had imagined many things, punishment, anger, shouting, but never the police. She watched, her small hands pressed against her mouth, as Victor's face drained of color. "Wait, hold on. We can talk about this," Victor said quickly, his voice suddenly slippery, desperate. "There's no need to bring outsiders into this. I'll make it right. I'll find a way." The donor's gaze was unyielding. The time for excuses is over. Amara's heart pounded. For the first time, she saw fear in Victor's eyes. The same man who had made her feel powerless now looked powerless himself. And in that moment, hope no longer felt like a dream. It felt real. Victor's panic was almost pitiful. His face glistened with sweat as he stumbled forward, hands outstretched in a desperate attempt to stop the donor from dialing. "Wait, please, you don't understand. I didn't mean any harm. I was only trying to make life easier for all of us. That car? It's an investment. I can drive for work, earn money." The donor turned his shoulder, shielding Amara as she clung to him, her small fists clutching his sleeve. His voice was sharp and cutting. "You call this easier? Look at her." He gestured toward the trembling girl, her twisted leg drawn tightly to her chest. "She's in agony every single day while you flaunt your theft on the street. You traded her future for your pride. That is not easier. That is cruelty." Amara's tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She had heard adults argue before, neighbors, teachers, even Victor's drinking companions, but never had anyone spoken so fiercely on her behalf. The words struck something deep within her, something that had long been buried under fear, the belief that she mattered. Victor flinched at the donor's words, then tried again, his tone shifting from anger to pleading. "Look, sir, let's not blow this out of proportion. I'll sell the car. I'll get the money back. The surgery can still happen. No need to involve the police." The donor's phone remained in his hand, screen glowing. "You had your chance. The charity trusted you. I trusted you. And you proved yourself unworthy." He tapped a number, his thumb hovering. Amara's wide eyes followed the motion, her small voice breaking through the tension. "Mister, will they take him away?" The donor crouched slightly, his stern expression softening as he looked at her. "What do you want, Amara? Do you want to stay here? With him?" Her lips trembled. She glanced at Victor, who stared back with wild, fearful eyes. The memories flooded her, the nights of hunger, the endless yelling, the cruel dismissal of her pain. She shook her head quickly, whispering, "No, I don't want to stay." Victor's jaw dropped. "Amara, how could you—" But the donor silenced him with a glare so powerful that Victor's words choked in his throat. "She has spoken. That's all I need to hear." Amara's heart pounded. For the first time, her voice had changed something. She had chosen. Victor stumbled backward, muttering curses under his breath. He knew the law could strip everything from him. Without the car, without Amara, without the charity's support, he would be left with nothing. Rage bubbled up, but fear kept it from spilling over. He clenched his fists, breathing hard. The donor rose to his full height, dialing with steady hands. His voice into the phone was calm, authoritative. "Yes, I need an officer dispatched immediately. Theft of charitable funds. Child endangerment. Yes, the child is safe now, but hurry." The words child endangerment pierced Amara's ears. She had never had a label for what she suffered, but now she realized it wasn't her fault. It wasn't because she was weak or needy. It was because she had been wronged. Victor staggered toward the window, muttering as he stared at the car outside. His voice broke into fragments. "They can't take it. They can't. I won't let them." The donor positioned himself between Victor and Amara, his frame unyielding, his presence like a shield. "It's over," he said flatly. "You will answer for what you've done." Amara pressed her face against the donor's arm, breathing in the faint scent of cologne and safety. For the first time in her short life, she allowed herself to believe she was no longer alone. And though the sound of sirens was still distant, faint on the horizon, she knew they were coming. And with them, justice. The shrill wail of sirens grew louder with each passing second, their echoes bouncing off the narrow streets outside the apartment. Amara's small body stiffened at the sound. Sirens had always meant trouble, fear, chaos. But this time, pressed close against the donor's side, she felt something different. Hope. Victor, on the other hand, erupted into frantic motion. He paced back and forth, his face slick with sweat, muttering under his breath. No, this can't be happening. They'll ruin me. They'll take everything." His eyes darted wildly, first to the car, then to the door, then back to the donor. "You can't do this to me. Do you hear me? You're not God." The donor's voice was calm but sharp enough to cut glass. No, Victor, I'm not God. But the law is coming, and you can't run from that. Amara watched as Victor's rage boiled over. He lunged toward the table, grabbing the car keys, clutching them like a lifeline. If I drive away now, they won't catch me. I can disappear. Start fresh. The donor stepped forward, his hands steady, his eyes unflinching. You'll never escape your own guilt. A pounding knock rattled the door, followed by a firm voice. Police! Open up! Victor froze, the keys trembling in his grip. His bravado cracked, replaced by raw terror. He looked at Amara, his eyes wide and wild. Tell them I'm a good father. Tell them it's all a mistake. Amara shrank back, her lips quivering. For years she had been silenced, forced to nod, to obey, to swallow her pain. But not now. She shook her head slowly. No, I won't lie anymore. Her words were quiet, but rang louder than any scream. The donor pulled the door open. 2 officers stepped inside, their presence filling the cramped room. One glanced at Amara, her tear-stained face and twisted leg, then at Victor clutching the keys with white knuckles. Sir, put those down. Now! Victor barked a bitter laugh, waving the keys wildly. You think you can just waltz in here and take me away? I didn't do anything wrong. That car is mine. The second officer's voice was firm. You're under suspicion of misusing charitable funds and child endangerment. Don't make this harder than it has to be. The donor stepped aside, guiding Amara gently behind him. She clutched his sleeve tightly, peeking out from behind his arm as the scene unfolded. Her heart pounded like a drum. Victor's last attempt at control came in a desperate shout. She's my daughter. Mine. No one's taking her from me. But Amara's small voice cut through the chaos, fragile yet unwavering. You're not my daddy. The room fell into stunned silence. Even Victor's face went slack, as if struck by lightning. One officer moved swiftly, seizing Victor's arm, forcing the keys from his grip. The metallic jingle as they hit the floor sounded like chains breaking. You're coming with us, the officer declared. Victor struggled, cursed, but his strength was no match for the cold steel cuffs snapping around his wrists. Amara's breath came fast and shallow. She had dreamed of freedom, of justice. But now that it was happening, it felt surreal, almost impossible. She pressed her face into the donor's sleeve, whispering, Is it really over? The donor crouched down, meeting her eyes with unwavering steadiness. Yes, Amara, it's over. He won't hurt you again. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time they weren't only from pain. For the first time, they carried relief. And as Victor was led out of the apartment, shouting empty threats that no longer carried any power, Amara's fragile heart felt the first flutter of something new, freedom. The slam of the door echoed through the apartment as the officers dragged Victor away, his curses fading into the distance until there was nothing left but silence. A silence so heavy it pressed against the cracked walls and settled into the air like smoke. For a long moment, Amara did not move. Her small frame trembled on the thin mattress, her tiny hands still clutching the donor's sleeve as if letting go might cause everything, the safety, the protection, the sudden glimmer of hope, to vanish like a dream at dawn. The donor lowered himself to one knee, bringing his sharp, steady eyes level with hers. His voice, though deep and firm, softened with warmth. Amara, he said gently, it's finished. He won't come back. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Her lips parted, but no words came at first. Fear still clung to her bones, woven into the very rhythm of her heartbeat. Finally, her voice broke free, thin and trembling. But what happens to me now? Where will I go? That question struck him harder than Victor's lies ever could. This wasn't just about surgery or stolen money. This was about a child who had been abandoned in every way that mattered. The donor placed his hand over her small ones, steadying them. What will happen now, he promised, is that you will be cared for. You will get your surgery. You will heal. I'll make sure of it. Her wide brown eyes blinked up at him, disbelief swimming in their depths. Really? You mean I can walk? Like the other kids? A faint smile touched his lips, though his gaze remained firm, unshakable. Yes, you will walk and you will run, and if you want, you'll dance. Nothing will hold you back." For the first time in her young life, Amara felt her chest loosen. The iron weight of despair, which had pressed down on her since her mother's death, began to lift, replaced by something she had almost forgotten: hope. The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind of change. For Amara, it felt as though her world had cracked open and light was finally pouring in. Social workers visited the apartment, speaking gently, asking questions. They listened when she spoke of hunger, of pain, of the nights she cried herself to sleep while Victor ignored her. Their pens scribbled across papers, their eyes softening with every word she uttered. Meanwhile, the donor moved with quiet determination. His influence opened doors that had once been locked shut. Phone calls were made, appointments secured. Within a week, Amara's name appeared on hospital schedules that had seemed impossible before. The first time she entered the hospital, her heart pounded. The scent of antiseptic and fresh linen filled her nose, so different from the stale cigarette smoke and mildew of Victor's apartment. Nurses greeted her with smiles, offered her juice, and tucked her into a bed with crisp white sheets. It felt unreal, like she had stepped into another world. But despite the kindness surrounding her, fear lingered. One night, curled beneath the hospital blanket, she stared at the ceiling, her twisted leg aching as always. She turned her head toward the donor, who sat in a chair beside her bed, his coat draped over the armrest. His eyes, though tired, were watchful, steady. Her voice broke the stillness. "What if it doesn't work?" He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "What do you mean?" "The surgery," she whispered, her throat tightening. "What if it doesn't help me? What if I never walk?" For a moment, silence hung between them. Then the donor reached for her small hand, enclosing it in his larger one. "Amara, listen to me. You are already stronger than most grown men I've ever met. You've survived things no child should have to face. This surgery will help. But even if it takes time, even if it's hard, you won't face it alone. I'll be here every step of the way." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were different from before. They weren't born of pain or despair. They shimmered with the fragile beauty of hope. "You promise?" "I promise," he said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of truth. The morning of the surgery arrived with bright, sterile lights and the hum of machines. Doctors and nurses moved with precise confidence, their voices calm but purposeful. Amara clutched her blanket as they wheeled her into the operating room, her curls bouncing against the pillow, her wide eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. Her heart raced. Fear clawed at her chest. She turned her head slightly, searching, and found him, standing just outside the glass doors, watching. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides, but his gaze never wavered. He gave her a small nod, silent but strong. Amara swallowed hard, forcing a shaky smile. Then, as the anesthesia mask was lowered, she whispered a final thought before sleep claimed her. "I am not alone anymore." The hours crawled by. The donor paced the hallway, every tick of the clock hammering against his patience. He had given money before, millions even, but never had he witnessed so closely what those donations truly meant. This wasn't a number on a check. This was a child's life, her chance at freedom. When the surgeon finally emerged, peeling off gloves with a tired but satisfied smile, the donor was on his feet at once. "How is she?" "The procedure went well," the doctor assured him. "Her leg has been corrected. She will need physical therapy in time, but she has every chance of walking normally." Relief crashed over him like a wave. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaling the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Inside the recovery room, Amara stirred, her face pale but peaceful. Machines beeped steadily beside her. Her small chest rose and fell with the rhythm of sleep, and though she was weak, her future no longer felt like a closed door. It stretched open before her like the first rays of sunrise after a long, endless night. For the first time, she dreamed not of pain, but of possibility. The first days after surgery were a blur of pain and exhaustion. Amara woke in the hospital bed with her leg wrapped in bandages, a dull ache spreading through her body. At first, she thought nothing had changed. Her leg still hurt, still felt heavy and unfamiliar. She wept quietly, afraid the doctors had been wrong. But the donor never left her side. Each time her tears fell, he sat closer, speaking in a low, steady voice. "Healing takes time, Amara. Don't be afraid of the pain. It means your body is waking up to a new beginning." Those words echoed in her small heart. A new beginning. The nurses came often, adjusting her bandages, checking her vitals. The physical therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Lewis, arrived each morning with a clipboard and an encouraging smile. "Good morning, sweetheart. Are you ready to work today?" Amara's instinct was to shake her head, to hide beneath the covers. But each time, when she turned her eyes to the chair by her bed, the donor was there. His expression was calm, firm, filled with expectation. He never pressured her with harshness. He simply believed in her. And somehow, that belief gave her courage. The first therapy session was agony. Dr. Lewis helped Amara sit upright, her small hands gripping the rails of the hospital bed. Sweat already dotted her forehead. The therapist guided her to place her feet on the floor. "One foot at a time," she said softly. "Just try to feel the ground." Amara whimpered as her newly corrected legs stretched downward. Every nerve screamed. Her dark curls clung to her damp forehead as she bit her lip. "I can't," she gasped, eyes filling with tears. "It hurts too much." Before she could collapse back onto the bed, the donor's voice cut through the storm of panic. "Look at me, Amara." Her watery eyes lifted. "You've survived worse pain than this," he said firmly. "Every day with him, every night you cried alone, you made it through. That strength is still in you. You can do this. Just one step. That's all." His words struck deep. Slowly, trembling, she let Dr. Lewis guide her to stand. Her legs shook violently beneath her. For a moment, it felt as though she would fall, but then her bare feet touched the cold floor. She was standing. Amara gasped, her mouth opening in disbelief. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm standing." The donor's chest tightened. He had seen business deals worth millions, had stood in boardrooms where power shifted with a word. Yet nothing compared to this single moment. A fragile little girl, standing for the first time without fear. The days turned into weeks. Each session was grueling, but with every effort, Amara grew stronger. She learned to balance, to shift her weight, to trust her leg. Some days she cried, frustrated and exhausted, begging to stop. Other days, she surprised herself, managing small victories, a longer walk, a straighter posture, fewer tears. Through it all, the donor remained. He attended every session, applauded every effort, and never once let her believe she was alone. Hospital staff began to whisper about him. The wealthy man who had not only donated money, but sat day after day by the bedside of a child who wasn't his own. One afternoon, after nearly 2 months of therapy, Amara stood at the parallel bars in the therapy room. Her hands gripped the rails tightly, her legs trembling. Dr. Lewis encouraged her gently. "Okay, Amara. Today, let's try to take your first independent step." Her heart pounded. She looked up nervously at the donor, who stood a few feet away, his arms folded but his eyes soft with encouragement. "You can do this," he said. "One step toward me." She bit her lip, tears already blurring her vision. "What if I fall?" "Then I'll catch you," he said simply. Something inside her steadied. She lifted her foot, just a little, just enough, and moved it forward. Her balance wavered, but she caught herself on the bar. Another shuffle, another breath, and then her foot landed. A step. The room erupted in quiet cheers from the nurses and therapists. Dr. Lewis clapped softly, pride shining in her eyes. But for Amara, the world seemed to pause. She had done it. She had taken her first step. She let out a sob, not of pain, but of overwhelming relief. I walked." The donor moved closer, kneeling so his eyes met hers. His voice broke slightly as he whispered, "Yes, Amara, you walked, and soon you'll run." She threw her arms around his neck, clinging to him as tears of joy soaked his suit jacket. For the first time in her life, the chains of pain and cruelty had fallen away, replaced by freedom. That night, back in her hospital bed, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. But unlike the nights with Victor, these were not hours filled with hunger or fear. She thought of the future, of parks, of schoolyards, of running without pain. And as she drifted to sleep, her heart whispered words she had never dared believe before. I have a future. I am free. Weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, Amara's steps grew stronger. The girl who once cried in agony on a dirty mattress was now walking across polished hospital floors, her curls bouncing, her smile hesitant but real. Nurses would stop to wave at her. Therapists clapped with every improvement, and even other children in recovery whispered her name with admiration. The donor never missed a session. He was there through every stumble, every fall, every tear, and when she succeeded, his eyes shone with pride. To the world, he was a wealthy man, a businessman, a figure of authority. But to Amara, he was something far more important, a guardian, a steady hand guiding her into the future. One crisp morning, Amara walked, without rails, without hands holding her, straight across the therapy room. Her steps were shaky, uneven, but they were hers. At the end of the path, the donor stood waiting, arms open. She collapsed into his embrace, laughing through tears. I did it. I really did it. Yes, he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. You did it, Amara, and no one can ever take this away from you. But healing was more than physical. The charity that had first raised funds for Amara's surgery heard of what had happened, the theft, the betrayal, and the miracle of her recovery. Outrage poured in from the community. Donations flooded once again, not for Victor, but for Amara. Cards arrived at the hospital, filled with kind words from strangers. You are brave. We believe in you. Keep walking, little warrior. For a child who once believed she was invisible, forgotten by the world, it was overwhelming. She cried as she read them, clutching each letter like a treasure. Meanwhile, Victor's trial moved quickly. With evidence of the stolen funds and testimony from the donor, he was sentenced. For the first time, the law recognized the suffering he had inflicted. And though Amara was shielded from the courtroom, she heard the words she had longed for. He can't hurt you anymore. One evening, after another long therapy session, Amara sat on a park bench just outside the hospital. The air was cool, the sky streaked with gold and pink as the sun set. Children ran past, chasing each other with laughter. She watched them with wide eyes, her heart aching with both longing and excitement. The donor sat beside her, quiet for a moment before speaking. One day soon, you'll be out there with them. She tilted her head toward him. Do you really think so? He smiled, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I don't just think so. I know so. Amara's eyes shimmered with tears. She had been afraid for so long, afraid of pain, of hunger, of being unwanted. But for the first time, she felt safe enough to imagine tomorrow. She whispered softly, almost to herself. Mommy would be proud of me, wouldn't she? The donor's throat tightened, but he nodded firmly. Yes, Amara. She would be more proud than anyone in the world. The weeks passed quickly. Finally, the day arrived when Amara no longer needed crutches. The hospital staff gathered around, watching as she walked across the room unassisted. Her steps were not perfect, but they were strong, defiant against the years of suffering. When she reached the donor, the room erupted in applause. She looked up at him, her face glowing with joy. I can walk, she said simply. Yes, he answered, tears in his eyes. And soon, you'll run toward the life you deserve. Amara threw her arms around him, holding tight. In that moment, the past no longer chained her. The cruelty, the hunger, the stolen money, all of it was behind her. Ahead lay freedom, opportunity, and the love she had been denied for so long. That night, as she lay in her new room, not a dingy apartment, but a warm, safe home provided through the charity, she whispered into the darkness, I'm free. I'm not alone anymore. And for the first time, sleep came easily, carrying her into dreams not of pain or fear, but of running through open fields, her laughter soaring into the sky. The story of Amara Johnson, the little black girl who once cried in agony, betrayed by the man meant to protect her, was no longer one of despair. It was a story of resilience, of justice, of kindness. Because in the end, the wicked were punished, and the good were rewarded.